Hello, I'm Locke Meredith, and I'd like to invite you to join me on the next Legal Lines. We have on the show Judge Jimmy Kuhn. He is currently a judge on the First Circuit Court of Appeals, and he's running for the Louisiana Supreme Court. Judge Kuhn's going to talk to us about the difference between a district court judge, an appellate court judge, and a judge on the Louisiana Supreme Court, and why he's running for the Louisiana Supreme Court. So join us on the next Legal Lines with Judge Jimmy Kuhn.
Hey, area code 225. Now with Cox Digital Telephone, you can get unlimited local calling anywhere in 225 at no extra charge. Gonzales to Baton Rouge, Denham Springs to Zachary, and everywhere in between. Call anywhere within 225 without dialing a 1 or the area code. Join the more than 2 million customers who have switched to Cox Digital Telephone with the largest local calling area in Louisiana. Join now for just $9.99 a month. That's over 50% less than AT&T and detail. Call now to order.
Oh, happy day!
My cars are clear.
The picture is beautiful, thanks to Cox. Advanced fiber. It's here.
In Louisiana.
My internet's faster.
Thanks to Cox. I'm using it.
We're using it.
Cox Advanced Fiber. I love it.
Welcome to Legal Lines. I'm Locke Meredith, and I'm very pleased to have on the show Judge Jimmy Kuhn. He is a judge for the First Circuit Court of Appeal. Judge, thank you so much for being on the show.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity.
Judge, you're also running for the Louisiana Supreme Court, so let's give the folks a little background about yourself, historical perspective.
Well, I don't know how much detail you would want or people might be interested in, but I started practicing law in 1973. I started in Hammond, Louisiana with a firm that did exclusively insurance defense work. Later moved to Livingston Parish, practiced law there for a while, actually totally about 17 years.
As I understand, an assistant district attorney for a while?
10 years as an assistant DA. Represented some public bodies there, some banks, Dixie Electric, and other businesses. Anyway, I ran for district court judge, got elected.
That was in 94?
Actually, it was like in 90, and then I served to 94, I believe. And I then ran for the First Circuit Court of Appeal, got elected. It's a 10-year term. I was up for re-election 2 years ago and was re-elected without opposition.
Judge, what motivated you to become a judge in the first place? District court, appellate court, now you're for the Supreme Court? You
know, it's a fascinating question that I've been confronted with quite a bit lately. But
it's a lot of work. People don't realize it.
I come from a large family. I'm number 8 of 9 children.
I read that.
And 2 of my grandparents also lived with us, so we were close in every respect imaginable. But one thing that my parents taught me, particularly my mother, was to, if you're going to do something, do it right, invest yourself totally. So when I started practicing law, my practice was exclusively litigation. And so I was either in the courtroom every day or preparing to go to the courtroom. Loved my job, was making a good living, but Cheryl, my wife, and I had adopted some twins, and one Sunday morning as we were on our way to church, I had a group of lawyers from Hammond show up at our house and asked that I consider running for district judge. I kind of chuckled at them then, and the reason was,
say why you?
Well, you know, it would be a dramatic decrease in pay,
right?
And I just loved the job. I loved the courtroom. Have utmost respect for the whole process.
A whole different role, judge versus
absolutely
an attorney, litigator.
Absolutely, but. At night, even as my kids were like 7, 8, 9, or 10 years old, we had a routine. Jimmy always used to like to hug my neck and kiss me goodnight, like I said, even at 9 or 10 years old. And then Cheryl and Jimmy and Jennifer would sit in a room and read books. And so this particular Sunday night, the night that Sunday I mentioned earlier, I was sitting on the floor with files all around me, getting ready for the upcoming week. And Jimmy kissed me goodnight, and then he was walking off to go read with Cheryl and Jennifer, and I was saying, you know, I need to change my life. I was doing things I enjoyed, but the quality of life certainly could have been greater.
It's very, very time consuming.
Yes. So as fate would have it, the phone rang. I answered their call. I said, yeah, I've decided I'm going to run for judge, and that's how I ran. And you know, the same thing, I feel the same thing about the courtroom as I did practicing law. I love it so much that I have to rein myself in and not just
throw yourself into the work all the time.
Yes. You know, I'm kind of boring person, I guess. I no longer hunt. I no longer fish. I don't play golf. I just get into the work.
Judge, huh?
The judging, and as you know, I've been
But there's a lot to that. Explain to the folks what a judge does.
Well,
and the roles are different on the district court versus the appellate court level.
True. On the district court, your job is to more or less manage the courtroom, particularly if you have a jury trial, and then let the lawyers, as best they can, try to convince the jury within the bounds of ethics, professionalism, and being civil to each other, and present the law to the jury. So it's more like a management job there. Of course, you still have to be versed in the law and some experience in the courtroom. Whereas at the Court of Appeal, which sits in a 3-judge panel, typically oftentimes larger, you don't retry the case, and that's a misconception.
At the trial court level with the district court judge, that's where all the evidence comes in and all the testimony comes in and the doctors testify or whatever. Right. Appellate court, that doesn't happen. That record better be made. You guys are looking at transcripts.
Right. And actually what we're looking for to see if there was any mistake that interfered with finding the truth or knowing what the law is. So we look to see if the judge has made some legal error in his handling of the trial, or if there's some kind of factual mistake made. So it's really a search for mistakes, but it's academic and intellectual because, as you just pointed out, it's reading and writing. And the Court of Appeal is extremely important. Only 3% of the cases across the state are ever appealed, and even with that, that's a great number.
So a ton of cases, I know.
Right, and the court has to be very cautious because we might say something that impacts the law and not the way that we would want it to. So it's a very intense intellectual examination of it, and you have to consider how it might affect other cases down the road and the law itself.
And how does that role as a First Circuit appellate court judge differ, or how similar is it to the role as a Louisiana Supreme Court justice?
Well, obviously you've thought about this a great deal, and it's a lot different from the appellate court to the Supreme Court.
Big implications for a decision of the Supreme Court.
Enormously important, and the reason is the Supreme Court's role, as I see it, is to take the cases that have been decided across the state and consider the legislature's laws that they enact, and then make the law into, I describe it like as if it were a ball of clay with lumps all over it. When they get through with the law and the case, the ball ought to be smooth, perfectly round, make sense to the people practicing law, make sense to business people, to people who might be in domestic disputes and so forth, so that it all makes sense and the world's in order, if you will.
There's not nearly as many cases that get to the Louisiana Supreme Court as compared to the appellate courts because it's more selective. Bottom line is it has control of the appeals.
Right.
Let's talk about that and the role on the Supreme Court on the next segment. This is Locke Meredith Legal Lines, Judge Jimmy Kuhn. We'll be right back.
Hey, area code 337. Now with Cox Digital Telephone, you can get unlimited local calling anywhere in 337 at no extra charge. Lafayette to Lake Charles, Kaplan to Crowley, and everywhere in between. Call anywhere within 337 without dialing a 1 or the area code. Join the more than 2 million customers who have switched to Cox Digital Telephone with the largest local calling area in Louisiana. Join now for just $9.99 a month. That's over 50% less than AT&T. Call now to order.
Welcome back to Legal Lines. I'm Locke Meredith. Again, very pleased to have on the show Judge Jimmy Kuhn. He is a First Circuit Court of Appeal judge, and he's running for the Louisiana Supreme Court. Again, Judge, thank you for being on the show. We were talking about what a Louisiana Supreme Court justice does and what the purpose of the Louisiana Supreme Court is, and you kind of analogize it to removing the rough spots on a ball. Explain to the folks how the court receives cases and decides cases.
Our court system mirrors the federal court system in that regard. That is, though you might have a right to an appeal in certain cases, the Louisiana Supreme Court is what we call in the legal profession a writ court. That is, you make a request to the court to consider your case. In fact, they have a specific rule, it's Rule 10, and it sets out the criteria that they consider and whether or not to agree to hear the appeal. And it's very specific, directed at very specific purposes of the court. That is, the Louisiana Supreme Court is not a super court of appeal. That's not the role of that court at all.
And it's not a legislative body either, is it?
It is not a legislative body, and of course, you know, when you hear someone saying, well, the Supreme Court ought to hear more cases, or it ought to be more sensitive to this interest group or that interest group. For example, people like to say they want law and order and we ought to be tough on crime and so forth. That's more appropriately directed at the district attorney and the law enforcement people. They ought to be
the enforcers.
The enforcers.
Prosecutors.
The role of the court is a totally different portion of the government, and the role is totally different.
Let's describe for the folks a quick little education process here, that we have three branches of government, and it's the legislative branch, it's the executive branch, and it's the judiciary. And the legislative branch does what?
Well, of course, the legislative branch really represents the will of the people.
They're elected.
They're elected, and if they are truly representatives, if people, for example, decide that if you, on a criminal context, want to say there's a mandatory jail sentence for possession of cocaine, the legislature has the absolute authority to do it. You know that state legislatures, unlike Congress, have plenary powers, and when I'm teaching at Southeastern, I say that means plenty of power. They can do what they want with the law as long as it's not prohibited by the Constitution.
Which is the only time the courts would come into play is if they see a statute that the court considers unconstitutional.
Correct, correct.
Or is when the only time they're supposed to come into play.
Correct. Oftentimes, you know, it's something unclear about the legislative intent. Then and only then should the court try to determine what the intent is, and oftentimes what happens is the court, even the appellate court, would get the committee debates or discussions so that we could try to determine what that would be. But that's very, very, very seldom. Certainly the court, no court, ought to be making legislative attempts.
And so when we say that the Louisiana Supreme Court, or for that fact, the federal court shouldn't be legislating from the bench, that's really what we're talking about.
That is precisely what you're talking about.
And then the executive branch does what?
Well, the executive branch actually is supposed to carry out the laws, enforce the laws. That doesn't mean that the governor, the attorney general, the state treasurer and so forth are supposed to have a gun on their side, but the legislature even says we want to, in a simple way, build this building. And so they tell the administration, the governor, if you will, we want to build this building, we've appropriated the money, and you see to it that the contract is let and the building is built.
You've been on the First Circuit for 12 years, and now you're running for the Louisiana Supreme Court. Tell the folks why.
Well, you know, it's difficult when you run for office. All of us want to have some humility, but I've learned that it's important to, you know, address that question particularly. I believe, Locke, that I have something to offer the court. Coming from my background, such as it is, with a large family, and coming from 12 years experience on the Court of Appeal, I learned that it's important to try to get people to collaborate on things, these opinions that are so important to everybody in Louisiana. I can do that, and in doing that, if I can get everyone as much as possible to debate an issue, make sure that it's correct, and then give the best possible decision, opinion to the public, then it helps the court system and it helps maintain this order that we ought to have.
Bottom line is, this is not a position that you should be learning on the job, and frankly, Judge, you're the one with the most experience at the appellate court level.
Well, I appreciate that. That's true, and I think that's a very important point in this election. Supreme Court justice is extraordinarily important to the state, and letting different interests become involved in the selection of someone for the Supreme Court's very dangerous. We have a bad reputation across the nation for the opinions and decisions of our court, and I think it would just, if we had a good court that people learn to respect more, and the people outside the state learn to have confidence in, that it would improve our way of life greatly.
Bottom line is, legislatures are elected, the governor and the executive branch is elected, and we're a little unique in that our judges, and particularly Supreme Court, is elected. The terms are how long?
10 years.
So there is some accountability, but it's only every 10 years.
Right.
And Frank,
the accountability should be, you know, this may sound a little corny, but I take it very seriously. I've administered any number of oaths of offices for public officials, and in fact, I know it by heart. It begins by saying, "I, Jimmy Kuhn, do solemnly swear," and of course, we know who we're swearing to. Either it's in fact done or it's symbolically done by raising your right hand and your left hand placed on a book. And then it goes on to say, faithfully and impartially perform.
key words.
Incredibly key words and incredibly important. I cherish those, and I think by standing by those, it increases the integrity of the court.
Now, Judge Caligaro is the justice he's the chief judge currently, and he's the one that is retiring at the end of 2008, and he's been there a long time.
Since 1972.
Long time. And Judge Kitty Kimball, she moves up to chief judge, assuming she's reelected.
Right.
And you would be filling an associate justice position.
That's correct.
And yet it's still political.
Yes, it's political.
Because you got to run.
That's right. Well, it's political, but I hope that I can have it remain political in the sense that who's best for the court and what's the role of the court. No special agendas, no special groups that want to be catered to. And I'm happy to say that most people that know me, either from being in court where I happen to be a judge there, and from practicing law, know how I feel about this.
Judge, let's continue this on the next segment of Legal Lines. I'm Locke Meredith and Judge Jimmy Kuhn. We'll be right back.
Oh, happy day!
My cars are clear.
The picture is beautiful, thanks to Cox. Advanced fiber. It's here.
In Louisiana.
My internet's faster.
Thanks to Cox. I'm using it.
We're using it.
Cox Advanced Fiber. I love it.
Welcome back to Legal Lines. I'm Locke Meredith. Again, very pleased to have on the show Judge Jimmy Kuhn with the First Circuit Court of Appeal, and he's running for the Louisiana Supreme Court. Judge, we were talking about the fact that at the Supreme Court you have to run for that position. Now, you're not running against Judge Kitty Kimball.
No, that's two different election districts. She is more or less the greater Baton Rouge area. This election district is the other part of the Florida parishes, and then a part of Jefferson and Orleans.
Let's explain to the folks in a little more detail what the process is how you get to the Supreme Court in terms of the litigation process and what they do with a specific case.
Well, as I said earlier, they have a specific rule which sets the criteria for the cases that they would agree to hear.
So it's not willy-nilly, I like that one, or I owe this guy a favor, or whatever. They have this criteria they use.
Right, and even if they might disagree with how the appellate court looked at a case, they may not agree to hear it because it doesn't play a part in their function to give order to the law across the state.
So just if you can quickly, what are a few of the criteria?
Well, one of the criteria is how it would impact or to reconcile differences in the various circuits. In Louisiana, we have 5 circuit courts of appeal, and if there's an opinion from 2 of them, say, that go one way and the other 3 another, they need to reconcile that.
Because we've got different laws being applied different ways in the same state.
Exactly, and it gives order. It gives order to it, so that they say these are the conflicts, and we need to reconcile this. So that's a very good example of what the role of the Supreme Court.
And would you say that's primarily the criteria that's used, or the most of the cases that get accepted, writs accepted?
I have no statistics on that, but logic would say that.
And so let's say I file a, excuse me, a writ, I try a case and I lose it, and I'll take it up to the First Circuit, and they either grant it, me recovery or deny it, and then I appeal it to the Supreme Court. What happens?
Well, if you were to take that kind of case with nothing else, they wouldn't agree to hear it.
That's right.
What the attorneys have to do is they make the request. The opponent may oppose that and ask that the Supreme Court not agree to hear the case, but you have to demonstrate there's some good purpose served for the law.
So we got to delineate in the writ why this case meets one of those criteria we talked about. And assuming it does, and the Supreme Court goes ahead and accepts the case, what's the next process?
Well,
what's the next step?
It's the usual appellate process. The attorneys file briefs. The Supreme Court reviews the record, reads the testimony, examines the evidence, examines the law, which is the real important function, because they're trying to reconcile something about the law. And then they have the attorneys appear and argue the case, and then, of course, the opinion. And
I imagine folks have seen news stories where you've got the United States Supreme Court, and they've got the 2 lawyers up there arguing at the podiums, and the justices are asking questions of those attorneys. Pretty much reflects kind of the way it goes down, doesn't it?
I think that's identically. That's a very good description.
And then prior to the argument by the attorneys, the justices have a large staff and clerks that research all of the issues, read the briefs, the judges look at that, and so the judges are prepared to ask the questions that help them figure out what they're going to do, don't they?
They do. And, you know, to varying degrees, I enjoyed the interaction with the lawyers, and it's helpful to me because I take the job so seriously because I want to be certain that I'm doing just the right thing, that I'm following the law, and that there's a just decision. It's an awesome responsibility, but I enjoy that.
Judge, I'm kind of smiling because, you know, there's a lot of lawyers that think their oral argument is probably not given a whole lot of weight in front of the justice. But bottom line is, you're saying it does carry some weight.
Well, I can't speak for everyone, but I can tell you from the people I work with and have over the years, it's very important to them. Because sometimes we want to know if the lawyer, they may be thinking about this specific case, but I might want to know, for example, how do you think this would impact other cases across the state? So I think it's incredibly important.
And then the process after the argument. Describe for the folks the process of when the judges get together and they're basically debating their positions or trying to come to a consensus decision. Explain that, please, sir.
Right. Well, it would, in an ideal world, the court conferences, that is, the 3 judges on the appellate panel, it would be 7, of course, on the state Supreme Court, get together and they actually conference. And they talk about the case, they talk about the law that applies, and how the decision might be played out. Because we can't just look at, okay, I think the trial court ought to be affirmed or reversed. We also have to consider its impact on the law. That is an enormous transition for someone going from, say, a trial judge to the appellate court, and it's a process that it takes years to learn and understand and be patient with to consider that.
Because the bottom line is, at the trial court, that judge is just worried about the facts of that specific case. At the appellate court level, it's the district. How is this going to affect our decisions, our other decisions on this issue? Are we going to conflict? Supreme Court, it's the whole state, all those various appellate courts.
That is absolutely true.
And the judges don't always agree, do they?
No, they don't agree, and that's a healthy thing. I suppose that's why when the Constitution was written in '74, and people through history have said the appellate court ought to be 3 judges, and then, as I said earlier, sometimes increase. It's so that you have 3 people looking at it with one goal in mind, and that is to get it right and that it be just.
And actually, there's the majority decision will be written by the majority, which that decision ultimately prevails. There's a concurring opinion, which is what?
A concurring opinion, a judge might agree with the result, the bottom line in a case, but for different legal reasons.
Because the decisions, when they're rendered by the courts, they're not just yes or no, you win or lose. It is a reasoned discourse, written document that is used by all the other courts below that court to process their case.
That is true.
And then, of course, you have the dissent. Explain to the folks what that is.
The dissent is you would disagree with the result, and it may be on a legal basis. That typically would be the reason, and explains why you do not agree.
Now, at the Supreme Court, majority rules.
Yes.
At the appellate court, you have panels, and the standard of review is a little different. Explain that to the folks.
Okay. It's still majority rule, but if an appellate court is going to reverse the trial judge, it takes 3 votes. So if you have a typical 3-judge panel, 2 want to reverse the trial judge, 1 doesn't. Then it goes to 5 judges, where presumably you'll get your 3.
And that's really not what takes place at the Supreme Court.
No, it's different.
Judge, thank you so much for being on the show. We appreciate it. Certainly have our support. This is Locke Meredith with Legal Lines, and Judge Jimmy Kuhn, thank you for being with us.
We have an offer that'll have you smiling from ear to ear. Right now, new Cox customers can receive a home phone line plus free installation, call waiting, caller ID, and much more for only $9.99 a month for 6 months.
Hello, I'm Locke Meredith, and I'd like to invite you to join me on the next Legal Lines. We have on the show Dr. Bill Cassidy. He's currently a Louisiana State Senator, and he's running for the United States Congress. Dr. Cassidy is going to talk to us about the issues that are facing our nation, healthcare problems, the war, and all the other issues that face us. He's also going to discuss the recent legislative session here in Louisiana. So join us on the next Legal Lines with Dr. Bill Cassidy.
We have an offer that'll have you smiling from ear to ear. Right now, new Cox customers can receive a home phone line plus free installation, call waiting, caller ID, and much more for only $9.99 a month for 6 months.
Oh, happy day!
My cars are clear.
The picture is beautiful, thanks to Cox. Advanced fiber. It's here.
In Louisiana.
My internet's faster.
Thanks to Cox. I'm using it.
We're using it.
Cox Advanced Fiber. I love it.
Welcome to Legal Lines. I'm Locke Meredith, and I'm very pleased to have on the show today State Senator Bill Cassidy. He is currently a state senator, but he's running for the United States House. Bill, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you very much, Locke.
Appreciate it. Tell folks a little bit about yourself. You're state senator, but you've been a medical doctor for a lot longer.
Well, I could go back further. Went to Terra High School, graduated in 1975, we won state championships. I still remember that.
Long time ago.
A long time ago. But the other people can feel good because Broadmoor beat us by 40 points and so did Glenos. So, having said that, yes, I work with LSU Med School. I'm a physician. I've been teaching medical students and residents for about 20 years here in Baton Rouge. And 2 years ago, ran to take Jay Darden's place, serving in that state senate.
He's a great state senator and currently Secretary of State.
Yeah, great guy. He's been a great model, and I'll call him sometimes and say, Jay, what do you think about this? And he's very helpful.
And why did you run for the state senate?
Yeah. As lawyers and physicians, we can serve people one at a time, and it's incredibly gratifying. But sometimes you want to do something more than one person at a time. I can see that tendency because I do these public health programs. We vaccinated 36,000 school children against hepatitis B. I saw that I enjoyed doing things that were public policy as well as one at a time.
But you know, you didn't talk it though, Bill. You also, like you say, you dove in and you've headed up stuff for years, taking care of those kids with the vaccines, free dental and health care. I mean, health care is a big issue for you.
Well, health care is a big issue for our community.
For everywhere right now, everybody.
And so I think we both have a desire to serve folks, and health care has allowed that, but state senate allows us to do it on a different level.
Like you said, policy.
Yes.
Because you're writing the laws, are helping anyway.
Yes.
Explain to the folks what's happened over the last 2 years as it relates to the whole health care issue.
You know, Hurricane Katrina obviously did affect our state and probably should affect our state more. So what we have now are folks that are insured, paying more money for their premiums and more for their copay.
Probably getting a whole lot less, frankly.
And getting less. And then we have folks on public assistance, Medicaid or Medicare, and the Veterans Administration, which is a good thing.
So taken care of by the federal government.
Exactly. But if you're in that middle gap, you earn too much to qualify for Medicaid, but not enough to afford insurance.
Because it's crazy.
It's crazy. You're the one who's stuck. Now, before the storm, most of our money to treat these folks went to New Orleans. New Orleans had most of the population. Since the storm, that population has spread out across South Louisiana, but the crazy thing is the money still goes there.
To New Orleans.
To New Orleans.